Even though Spider-Man No Way Home just came out and made an ungodly amount of cash, the character's big screen future is surprisingly uncertain. With lots of hints dropped during the film and beyond, there's lots of possibilities as to where it could go next. And actually, before we go ahead and get started with this video, I need to tell you that this is full of spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home, so proceed with caution. So let's take a look at some things that could happen in the MCU's Spider-Man 4. I'm Amy from What Culture, and here's 8 past clues to what could happen next. 8. That mid-credit symbiote tease is probably going to lead to a Venom-infected Peter. By far the clearest setup for future Spider-Man movies is the mid-credits scene in No Way Home, in which Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock gets transported back to his own universe whilst inadvertently leaving behind a small piece of the Venom symbiote. This, of course, leaves the door wide open for a storyline in which that symbiote infects Peter Parker. That might not happen in Spider-Man 4 or even in Spider-Man 5, but the opportunity is now there, and Sony/Marvel Studios can exploit it as and when they see fit. Interestingly, a Venom and Spidey crossover has actually been in the works for several years now. Kevin Feige recently told Collider that the success of 2018's Venom sparked conversations about how to merge the two characters. So again, whilst that No Way Home mid-credits scene might not be addressed in the very next movie, it's clear that they plan to revisit it in the future. 7. Daredevil being introduced into a Spider-Man movie could be teeing up an MCU partnership. Though anyone who's immersed in pop culture fandom already had a strong feeling that Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock would return in No Way Home, that didn't take away from how delightful it was to see him again, and this time on the big screen. But fan service aside, Cox's return in this particular context also raises a much bigger question. Why was he brought back specifically in a Spider-Man movie? Feige could have done literally anything he wanted here. He could have dropped Daredevil into Endgame's final battle or introduced him in She-Hulk, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to save Cox's long-awaited return for Spider-Man No Way Home. But why? Maybe there isn't a particular reason, maybe Feige just liked the idea, or maybe it was motivated by story because Peter needs legal help, and hey, Matt Murdock is a lawyer. But while we've got our tinfoil hats on, what if the intent here was to seed a connection between Daredevil and Spider-Man, a seed that's going to blossom into a superheroic partnership in Spider-Man 4 and beyond? Cox himself wants this to happen, and so do the fans. What if Daredevil becomes a supporting player in Spider-Man 4, with Kingpin as the villain? Sony and Marvel Studios literally just put these two heroes on screen together, so there's a decent chance they're thinking about taking it further. 6. Amy Pascal has hinted that MJ might get spider powers. This one doesn't come from the movies, but it's still potentially a huge clue. During a recent interview with the New York Times, Amy Pascal, the producer of all 3 MCU Spidey movies, was asked about the possibility of a woman gaining spider powers and fighting alongside Spider-Man, to which she responded, "Never say never," and gave a, quote, coy smile. Now, as evidenced by Andrew Garfield's Oscar-worthy performances in recent interviews, filmmakers are more than willing to mislead the press. And ultimately, Pascal didn't say anything definitive, so her comment could easily mean nothing. At the same time, though, it's possible that her coy smile was a genuine wink-wink, nudge-nudge response to the question. After all, wouldn't the producer of these movies know something that we don't? Besides, we've learned from the past that Pascal isn't exactly one to hold her tongue in interviews. 5. Peter is broke. Time for a job hunt? No Way Home was jam-packed with quippy dialogue, and a great example of this from early in the film was Peter's remark about being the most famous person on Earth, yet being completely broke. By the end of the film, the fame may have vanished, but the broke has not, and we see Peter moving into a dingy, run-down apartment, one that's highly reminiscent of the shabby building Tobey Maguire's Peter lived in during the Sam Raimi trilogy. The ending also presents us with a more stripped-down and traditional Spider-Man. Away from his MCU ties and his fancy Iron Man tech, he stitches together his classic-looking suit and heads out into the city, finally feeling like that true friendly neighborhood web-slinger that the MCU has arguably never delivered us. So if you combine Peter's dire financial situation with this more traditional approach to Spidey, what do you get? Simple. You get Peter working for the Daily Bugle. No Way Home was very deliberate in familiarizing audiences with this modern version of the Bugle, whilst also stripping away Peter's access to that Tony Stark gravy train. Plus, Peter at the Bugle is one of those classic beloved elements of the Spidey lore, so seeing it brought to life in the MCU feels kind of inevitable. And hey, who doesn't want more J.K. Simmons? 4. Electro's quip might be a cheeky indicator that Miles Morales is coming. Speaking of that great quippy dialogue, one of the best lines in the movie was Electro's third act comment about a black Spider-Man. It was one of the countless moments in the movie that drew cheers and whoops from cinema-goers, and though there's a strong likelihood that the line was intended to be nothing more than fun, we could also view it as a sign that Sony/Marvel Studios are thinking about bringing Miles Morales into the MCU. Hey, don't forget that an MCU Miles was teased all the way back in Spider-Man Homecoming. Aaron Davis had a small role in that movie, movie, played by Donald Glover, and he mentioned that he had a nephew. In Marvel lore, that nephew would be Miles. Due to the excellent PlayStation video games and the equally excellent 2018 animated Spider-Verse movie, Miles' popularity has exploded in recent years, making his live-action debut a highly anticipated moment. Given all that success, you have to imagine that the creatives have at least discussed the idea of folding him into the MCU within the next few years. We also have to wonder how on earth Spider-Man 4 is going to top No Way Home's multiverse shenanigans. It's inherently going to feel like a downgrade in some ways, but bringing in a character as beloved as Miles might fix it. 3. Ned's magical tingle could lead him down a path of sorcery. Ned's story in No Way Home went down a truly unexpected path, and he ended up being more pivotal than anyone could have imagined. Not only was he the one who brought Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man into the fold, but he even brought Doctor Strange to the Statue of Liberty during the final battle. So you could say that it was actually Ned who saved the day. Still, the most interesting part of all this isn't Ned's actions. It's the fact that he can capably perform magic in the first place. Remember how hard it was for Strange to open portals in the original Doctor Strange movie? And yet, in No Way Home, Ned seems to do it with ease. The movie also mentions that he can sometimes feel tingles in his hands, and that his grandma always suspected there was magic in his family. Combine all this with the hilarious sight of Ned using the cloak of levitation, and is No Way Home hinting at a possibility of Ned becoming a sorcerer in training? Strange even notices that Ned seems unusually capable in the magic department, and considering that Ned has ties to sorcerer Baron Mordo, it's possible that future Spidey movies will continue to explore this unexpected side of him. 2. No Way Home's multiverse cameos might be hinting at Spidey's next villain. That moment in No Way Home's second trailer, where Doctor Strange proclaims, "They're starting to come through and I can't stop them," led many fans to believe that this is where we'd see a bunch of wild multiverse cameos. In the actual movie though, that didn't happen, and Doctor Strange managed to seal the rift before things got out of hand. But whilst we didn't see these multiverse characters in full, we did get some quick glimpses at their silhouettes. People have managed to identify Black Cat, Rhino, Scorpion, and Kraven the Hunter, and over the coming weeks, as more people continue to rewatch the movie, we'll undoubtedly hear about even more. As is the case with a lot of things in this article, you could look at these cameos as nothing more than Easter eggs, but it's also possible that they're teasing some of the villains that Spidey will face in the upcoming movies. Kevin Feige has previously stated that Doctor Strange 2's title, Multiverse of Madness, is the biggest clue about where the MCU is headed, so it isn't too left field to suspect that maybe in the Doctor Strange film, the multiverse is going to crack fully open, allowing these villainous silhouettes to enter the MCU properly. 1. Kevin Feige says that Spider-Man will cross cinematic universes. The title quote is something that Feige said in 2019, shortly after Sony and Disney made up and agreed to make another solo Spidey movie set within the MCU. It's a comment that many people have forgotten about. Understandable, since 2 years is a lifetime. So what might this mean? Well, if we take Feige's comment at face value, it means that Spidey will appear in both the Sonyverse and the MCU going forward. Maybe he'll show up for Avengers movies and other big MCU crossovers, but his solo movies will now be set within the Sonyverse alongside characters like Kraven, Morbius, and Venom. And maybe that'll all start with Spider-Man 4, though it's somewhat unclear which characters exist within which cinematic universes. What we do know is that there's definitely some sort of divide, a divide that Feige seems to be hinting Spider-Man has the ability to straddle. And with that, we've reached the end of this list of 8 past clues to what could happen next in the MCU's Spider-Man universe. If you can think of any more wild clues that you think give something away, then put them in the comments down below. And remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.